to kind of how attitudes from the major sports organizations have changed when it comes to cannabis. And do you have any thoughts of kind of what was the tipping point?
Yeah, I do have I got a lot of thoughts on a lot of things, but yeah, so that, by them saying that we don't have enough evidence to change our policies, that is true. And they stuck with that, the NFL did. And it was actually the players that were pressuring them, saying, okay, fine, like you keep saying you don't have the data. Get the data then. Like
Mm,
figure out how to get the data because you can't just keep saying you don't have the data. That's kind of sometimes people will say that as it's like an excuse to just keep bad policies in place. It's
right.
the same as people saying there's no research. There's tons of research. We have tons of research that is already in the published literature. If you just look like that, it's excuses or these talking points, right? To just kind of leave things status quo because it is a very disruptive space because it's very misunderstood because we have that commercial industry too, right? A recreational industry. But the NFL, it was the players that kind of pressured them. And again, why are we so many years later and we don't have the data? And that is true. And I think one of the most complicated things with cannabis and getting that data is the funding, because
Mm,
really clinical trials are expensive. And so the people that are going to fund clinical trials would be the people that ultimately somehow would have some benefit from seeing the results, right? One way or the other. Now, the NFL truly does want the data. What they do with it is up to them. We are just here to get the data. And it'll be really interesting to see what they do with the data because, you still have other people that well, we need more data. We need more data. So it's
yeah.
hard to say. But I think that ultimately right now, because of the shift in the laws of our countries, the society is shifting. And so the policies that they have in pro sports and even, I mean, the NCAA just removed cannabis from their
Right.
prohibited list because those policies no longer align with society. Like society is changing their laws. And so, in order to have fluidity amongst the game and the place of the game in society, the dysfunction, it was starting to become too much. And so, I think that was one of the reasons why they got interested in, okay, well, let's see, maybe we can put up some funding and find people to get the data then. Because, you know, it's the amount of money, and yeah, and there's a lot of drug design for sure being done with cannabinoid molecules because the scaffolding of how they work will, it will, I mean, we have data already to show in animal models that there is a ton of effect there in neuroinflammation, neurodegeneration. We know that they are active there. Those molecules are active there. We know that. We now drug design has some complicated things like bioavailability. You have to have reproducible dose. You have to have and then the cannabinoid system itself is very complicated, and
Mm,
so that's a whole different thing. But when you look at funding the clinical trial, it's who would put money into that? Because with a product that's available to everybody right now with no prescription needed, and it will continue to be like that, industry is not going away. So whose benefit is it to put the money up to do the research? And even in the commercial industry, they don't actually need any data whatsoever to shelf a product. They don't need to show pharmacokinetic data. They don't need to show bioavailability. They don't need to show anything. They can package a product and sell it as long as they're following the food and drug compliance, but it's not an FDA approved thing. So, like, there's no incentive for them to fund it because they actually don't need it. They can
mm.
make an edible product and just put it on the shelf. And so it's tricky to find anybody that it would be interested in doing it. So I think the NFL, like I applaud them really for doing it because it shows that their minds are at least progressive and they're not, for a long time, the conversation about cannabis as a medicine just had the brakes on. Like nobody wanted to talk about it or
Right.
try to understand it, and it's no different than any pharmacological agent. It is bioactive and it should be treated that way. It's just that in society, we've chosen to make it available to everybody. And that's a different conversation, but it is a plant and perhaps should never have been prohibited in the first place.
Right.
Right. So, why we are in this place right now is a different conversation, but it's like, how do we get out of it? And so, I applaud the NFL for wanting to actually see the data and putting up, the call for research because it is not an easy space to get funding for sure.
Yeah.